Carla Hayes walked hand in hand with her 6-year-old son Tyler down the busy city sidewalk, her mind on groceries and bills, everyday struggles she had long since grown used to. She didn't notice the sleek black car racing toward the crosswalk until a sharp squeal of brakes cut through the air. The man in the expensive suit stepping into the street didn't see it either, too busy scrolling through his phone. "Watch out," Carla shouted, lunging forward. With a sharp tug, she yanked him back just as the car zoomed past, missing him by inches. They both tumbled onto the sidewalk, Tyler gasping, "Mom," as he rushed to her side. The man, Kingston Wright, CEO of Wright Pharmaceuticals, stared up at Carla, wide-eyed and breathless, as though still processing how close he had come to death. "Are you crazy?" Carla snapped, glaring down at him, her heart pounding. "You could have been killed." Kingston blinked at her, his usual commanding presence completely gone. People were staring, murmuring, but all he could see was this woman, her sharp brown eyes, her protective grip still on his jacket. You saved me," he stammered, running a hand through his tousled hair. Carla stood, dusting off her jeans. "Yeah, well, you're welcome," she said briskly, turning to check on Tyler, who clung to her hand. "Wait," Kingston said, scrambling up. "Please, let me thank you. At least let me take you both to lunch." She paused, eyeing him skeptically. "We're fine. I insist," he said softer now, glancing down at Tyler. "Really?" Tyler tugged her sleeve. "Mom, I'm hungry." Carla sighed, still wary but relenting. "All right, just lunch." An hour later, Carla found herself and Tyler sitting in a sleek, modern restaurant with marble floors and velvet seats, where even the napkins looked like they cost more than her weekly groceries. As they sat, Carla leaned across the table, whispering, "Tyler, don't touch anything." Kingston smiled gently. "Order anything you like, please." Carla squinted at the menu. "You got anything on here that doesn't cost half my rent?" He chuckled, and for the first time Carla saw a flicker of something real, something human. "I'm Kingston, by the way," he offered as if remembering. "Carla," she said, "and that's Tyler." Kingston looked at Tyler. "Thank you for lending me your mom. She saved my life." Tyler beamed, puffing out his chest. "Yeah, my mom's a superhero." Carla shook her head, embarrassed but smiling despite herself. When Kingston ordered, he picked dishes Carla couldn't even pronounce, and when her plate arrived, she hesitated before taking a bite. "Okay, wow," she muttered, eyes wide. "This is actually really good." Kingston grinned, watching her. She wasn't like anyone he knew. She didn't care who he was, didn't ask for anything. She had done the right thing because that's who she was. "So what do you do, Carla?" he asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated. "I'm a nursing assistant. Work nights. I do what I can." His smile softened. "That's an important job." Carla looked at him sharply. "You really mean that, or is that rich guy talk?" Kingston laughed. "No, I mean it." As lunch wound down, Kingston found himself reluctant to let them go. "Can I drive you home?" he asked. Carla narrowed her eyes. "You trying to be my hero now?" He shook his head. "No, you've got that title. I don't want to say goodbye yet." She studied him a long moment before sighing. "Fine." Kingston Wright wasn't the type of man to get distracted easily. But that morning, sitting in his luxury office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his mind was far from contracts and conference calls. He couldn't stop thinking about Carla and Tyler, about the way Tyler's hand had slipped into Carla's, how fiercely she had stood her ground even when he offered more than she expected. For the first time in a long time, Kingston felt something tugging at him. Something real. And before he could stop himself, he was in his car, navigating his way to a side of the city he rarely visited. Standing at Carla's apartment door, groceries in hand, he felt oddly nervous. When Carla opened the door and saw him, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. "I figured you might need a break," he said, lifting the grocery bag slightly. "I thought Tyler might like a snack." From inside, a warm voice chimed in. "Who's that, Carla?" It was Mrs. Moore, Carla's elderly next-door neighbor and Tyler's occasional babysitter, who was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. "Kingston, apparently," Carla muttered. Tyler appeared behind her, eyes lighting up when he saw Kingston. "Hey, you came back." "Of course, buddy." Not wanting to be rude, Carla begrudgingly stepped aside. "Well, since you're here." They sat around the small kitchen table, sipping tea and eating sandwiches. "So," Carla finally said, leaning back and studying him, "why are you really here, Kingston? Don't you have a boss to answer to? What would he think of you hanging out with us instead of working?" Kingston blinked, surprised and then amused. "I am the boss." Carla raised an eyebrow, unimpressed but fling. He chuckled. "No, I own Wright Pharmaceuticals." Her lips parted slightly, stunned. "You're that Kingston Wright?" Before he could answer, Tyler tugged at Kingston's sleeve. "Want to see my room? I got planes." Kingston smiled and stood. "I'd love to, Tyler." As Tyler eagerly dragged him down the hall, Carla watched them go, her heart torn between disbelief and something warmer. Something she wasn't ready to name just yet. After spending more than an hour talking over tea and sandwiches, with Tyler proudly showing Kingston every toy plane and dinosaur he owned, Carla glanced at the clock and rubbed her eyes. "All right, that's enough, Tyler," she said gently, standing to gather the plates. "Mr. Kingston needs to go, and I need to get some rest. I work the night shift." Tyler's face fell. "But Mom, can he stay a little longer, please?" Carla gave her son a look, her tone soft but firm. "No, baby. Mr. Kingston has a company to run, remember?" She cut her eyes toward Kingston, adding with a little smirk, "and probably a girlfriend waiting to see him." Kingston leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice calm but certain. "Actually, I'm not seeing anyone." Carla paused mid-step, raising a brow, her tone light but edged with something sharper. "Well, I'm sure that won't be a problem for long. Half the women in this city would line up for a man like you." Kingston studied her carefully, a small smile playing at his lips. "What about you?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could think better of it. Carla blinked, taken aback for half a second, then let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Me? Last time I went on a date, I came back with Tyler." She reached over to ruffle her son's hair affectionately. "I'm not interested." Kingston leaned back, watching her with quiet admiration. "Maybe you just haven't had a reason to be," he murmured. Carla gave him a long look, but instead of answering, she turned toward the kitchen. "Come on, Tyler. Time to let Mr. Kingston get back to his world." Still, Kingston couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted to be part of hers. Over the following weeks, Kingston kept showing up, sometimes with food, sometimes just to take Tyler to the park while Carla rested. And little by little, Carla began to let her guard down. One evening, after a long walk through the city, Kingston turned to Carla. "I'm not used to this," he admitted quietly. She raised a brow. "Used to what?" "People like you. Real people. People who don't want anything from me." Carla looked away. "I've got enough problems, Kingston. I don't need to add you to the list." He stepped closer. "What if I want to help carry them?" She met his gaze, something vulnerable flashing in her eyes. Over the following weeks, Kingston found himself spending more time with Carla and Tyler. Sunday afternoons at the park became routine, and he was even invited over for dinner a few times, though Carla never let him bring anything more than dessert. But one quiet evening, as they sat on Carla's small porch watching Tyler play with his toy planes in the yard, Carla finally spoke up, her voice softer than usual but serious. "Kingston," she said, not quite looking at him, "I need to be honest with you about something." He turned to her, alert, sensing the shift in her tone. "What's that?" She took a deep breath. "I've grown to like you a little," she said with a smirk, though there was no humor behind her eyes. "But I don't have the time or energy to invest in this. Whatever it is we're dancing around." Kingston frowned, sitting up straighter. "Carla." She held up a hand. "Let me finish." Her gaze finally met his, serious and unwavering. "I've built a simple life for me and Tyler. No drama, no cameras, no headlines. Just peace. And I like it that way." He swallowed hard, realizing where this was going. "I think," she hesitated, then continued, "I think you need to stop coming around so much. Tyler's getting attached. You should maybe schedule time with him if you really want to be a part of his life, like a mentor, a father figure, if that's what this is. Kingston's heart twisted at her words. Part of him wanted to argue, to insist on staying, but deep down, he knew Carla needed time. Time to trust him. Time to believe he wasn't just another man passing through. So he nodded slowly. Okay, I hear you. Carla's expression softened. Thank you. And though it was the last thing he wanted to do, Kingston knew if he wanted a real chance with her, he had to give her the space she needed. The days without Carla and Tyler weighed heavier on Kingston than he cared to admit. Though he tried to respect her space, the distance gnawed at him. He threw himself into work, spending long nights at his office, skipping meals and sleeping barely an hour or two at a time. Meetings blurred together, deadlines felt meaningless, and the endless emptiness of his penthouse became a silent reminder of everything he was missing. Eventually, his body gave out. It happened in the middle of a board meeting. One moment Kingston was standing, reviewing projections, and the next, everything tilted. His vision blurred, the room spinning. He collapsed before anyone could catch him. Hours later, Carla was ripped from sleep by a frantic knock on her door. Mrs. Moore stood there, out of breath, her robe clutched tightly. Carla, you needed to get to the hospital. Now. It's Kingston. He's been admitted. Carla's heart dropped. By the time she reached the hospital, Kingston's assistant, Kelly, was pacing the waiting room, her face pale and tense. Miss Hayes, Kelly said quickly, standing to greet her. He's stable now. Dehydration, exhaustion. The doctor said he pushed too hard. But you should see him. Kelly led Carla through long, quiet hallways until they reached Kingston's room. The hospital room was sterile and calm, machines softly beeping, IV lines running to Kingston's arm. He lay in the bed, pale but breathing, an oxygen monitor clipped to his finger. As they stepped inside, Kingston stirred, slowly turning his head. His eyes met Carla's, hers filled with tears, her face pale and stricken. Kingston, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. You'll do anything to get my attention, huh? Despite his exhaustion, Kingston gave her a weak, crooked smile. Worked, didn't it? Carla let out a soft, shaky laugh through her tears, walking closer to sit by his bedside, taking his hand gently in hers. You scared me half to death. Kingston squeezed her hand faintly, didn't want to stay away anymore. And in that moment, Carla realized just how deep this connection had grown. For both of them. Carla sat down slowly, never taking her eyes off Kingston as she gripped his hand. Seeing him like this, pale, hooked up to monitors, unraveled something inside her she hadn't been ready to admit. You scared me, she whispered again, wiping her cheeks with her other hand. Kingston gave her a weak smile, but it didn't reach his tired eyes. Guess I scared myself too. Carla swallowed hard, her throat tight. What happened to you? He let out a soft, shaky breath. I couldn't stop thinking about you, about Tyler, about what I was missing. He paused, staring up at the ceiling as if he couldn't bear to look at her. So I buried myself in work. Figured if I couldn't have you two in my life, I could at least keep my mind busy. Until you collapsed, she said quietly, her fingers tightening around his. Yeah, he breathed, glancing at her finally. Turns out, pushing everyone away, pushing you away, hurt a lot more than I thought it would. Carla's heart twisted painfully at his words. You could have called, she said softly, her voice breaking. I told you I needed space, not for you to give up on yourself. I wish I had really understood. I didn't want to be a burden, Kingston admitted, voice raw. I thought maybe if I stayed away, you'd be happier. Carla shook her head, tears spilling again. You were never a burden, Kingston. She paused, taking a deep breath. I've been scared. Scared of letting someone in, of Tyler getting attached, of me getting attached. Kingston's hand squeezed hers gently. Carla, I already am attached to both of you. She let out a soft, broken laugh, wiping her eyes. You don't make this easy, you know that? Never said I would, he whispered, his lips curving faintly. But I'm not going to pretend like walking away is something I can do. I care about you, Carla, and I care about Tyler. She looked away, struggling to steady her breath. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I've spent so long keeping my life small, safe, but seeing you like this. Her voice cracked, and she looked at him again, eyes glistening. I realized that if something happened to you and I never told you how I felt, I would regret it forever. Kingston's eyes softened, filling with something deep and vulnerable. How do you feel, Carla? He asked quietly. She gave him a watery smile, leaning closer. I felled for you, Kingston, and that scares me. Not sure if I can handle your world. He exhaled a shaky laugh, his hand reaching up to brush her cheek. You don't have to be scared. I'm right here, if you'll let me be. Carla closed her eyes briefly, leaning into his touch, then whispered, Okay, but we do this slow. My way. Kingston smiled, real and full of emotion this time. Whatever you need, Carla, just don't walk away. I'm not going anywhere, she promised, leaning forward to press a gentle kiss to his forehead. As she pulled back, Kingston smiled up at her, eyes shining. Now that I know you care, I think I'll have to get better faster. Carla laughed softly, wiping her tears. Good, because Tyler's gonna want to show you his new plane. And for the first time in weeks, Kingston felt like he could breathe again. Knowing he hadn't lost her, knowing they still had a chance. The doctors kept Kingston for a few days to monitor his recovery, and during that time, Carla visited every day, sometimes with Tyler. Tyler always brought a new drawing for Kingston, proudly taping them to the hospital room wall until the sterile space felt a little warmer. I'm gonna hang these in my office, you know? Kingston told Tyler with a smile, holding up a picture of a lopsided plane with Super Kingston written on the side. You have to get better first, Tyler said seriously, climbing into the chair beside the bed. Then you can come see my planes again. Carla watched the interaction quietly, a soft smile tugging at her lips. But when Kingston was finally discharged, Carla was there waiting with Tyler, ready to take him home. You're not going to that empty apartment of yours alone, she said firmly as they walked out of the hospital. You're still weak, and someone's got to make sure you eat something that's not takeout. Kingston tried to argue, but her sharp look stopped him. So when the car pulled up in front of his stunning penthouse, Carla stepped out like she belonged there, carrying Tyler's backpack in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. Kingston blinked at her. You planning on moving in? Carla shot him a look. Temporary nurse duty, and Tyler's on airplane patrol. Tyler grinned. Yeah, you can't build planes if you don't eat. Kingston chuckled, shaking his head. You two don't give a man a break, do you? Not when we care about him, Carla said quietly, walking past him into the penthouse. The first night was awkward. Kingston's penthouse, usually cold and empty, suddenly felt alive with Carla humming in the kitchen and Tyler running down the hall, exploring every room. Your house is huge, Tyler said in awe. Do you ever get lost in here? Kingston laughed, leaning on the couch. Sometimes. Guess I'll need a navigator like you. Carla brought him a bowl of homemade soup, placing it in front of him. Eat. You need to get your strength back. Kingston smirked. Yes, ma'am. She sat beside him, watching him take slow sips, and for a moment there was a comfortable silence between them, like a family. As days passed, Carla took over the kitchen, cooking real meals, making sure Kingston rested, and Tyler turned Kingston's guest room into his airplane headquarters. One evening, as Kingston sat on the couch, Tyler snuggled next to him, showing off his newest paper plane creation. Carla watched from the kitchen doorway, her arms folded, a soft expression on her face. You know, Kingston said, glancing over at her, this place feels a lot less empty with you two here. Carla smiled, though there was still a guarded look in her eyes. Don't get used to it. But what if I want to? Kingston asked gently, his gaze holding hers. Carla hesitated, feeling her heart twist at the look in his eyes, so hopeful, so vulnerable. One day at a time, Kingston, she whispered. One day at a time, he agreed. But in his heart, he knew he wanted every day, every moment, to be with them. Later that night, when Tyler was fast asleep in the guest room, Carla sat on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. Kingston joined her, a blanket draped over his shoulders. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded. Yeah, it's strange. I never pictured myself here, in a place like this, with someone like you. He reached over, gently taking her hand. Someone like me? He teased softly. She glanced at him, smiling faintly. You know what I mean? You've got this whole world I don't belong to. Carla, he said seriously, I don't care about that world. I care about you. About Tyler. You're the first thing that's made me feel like I have a life beyond business and boardrooms. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. It's not that simple. I know, he said quietly, but I'm willing to wait, to do it your way. Just don't shut me out. She looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of dishonesty, but found none. I don't want to shut you out, she whispered. He smiled, leaning closer, resting his forehead gently against hers. Then don't. For the first time, Carla let herself lean into him, just for a moment, feeling the steady beat of his heart, realizing maybe she didn't have to be strong alone anymore. From the guest room, Tyler stirred but didn't wake, safe, happy, and finally maybe with the beginnings of a family. And for Kingston, with Carla leaning into him and Tyler sleeping peacefully under his roof, it felt like home in a way his penthouse never had before. Life at the penthouse was finally starting to feel comfortable, almost normal, as Kingston recovered with Carla and Tyler around. But normal shattered one afternoon when the front door swung open with a soft chime. Kingston? A sultry voice called out, echoing through the spacious living room. Carla, in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, froze. Kingston looked up from the couch, frowning. His stomach dropped when Tori Buckman, his ex-girlfriend, glamorous as ever, in designer clothes and sunglasses perched on her head, strolled in, like she still owned the place. Tori? Kingston stood slowly, his voice sharp with surprise. What are you doing here? How did you even get in? She gave him a faux sweet smile. Still had my keycard, babe. You never deactivated it. Her eyes scanned him up and down. I heard you were in the hospital. I was worried. Kingston folded his arms. Don't act like you care. You left me for one of my own colleagues, remember? Tori's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. Water under the bridge, Kingston. You know how these things go. Besides, you look like you could use me. Before Kingston could reply, Carla stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, eyeing Tori coolly. Tori gave her a dismissive glance. Oh, you must be the help. Carla raised a brow, walking slowly toward Kingston without a word. Kingston's eyes widened slightly, catching on to her expression. Without breaking eye contact with Tori, Carla slipped her hand around Kingston's neck and pulled him down into a long, deep kiss, slow, intense, and unapologetic, as if no one else was in the room. Tori's mouth fell open. Kingston? She stammered, waiting for Carla to pull away. But Carla didn't stop. Finally, with a frustrated huff, Tori grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. As the door slammed behind her, Carla smirked up at Kingston and wiped her lipstick from his lips. I guess I told her, Carla said casually. Actions speak louder than words. Kingston blinked, then grinned. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Carla chuckled. Good idea. But even as they laughed, something unspoken settled between them. Something deeper, more certain. They were together, and no one, not even Tori, was going to come between them. As the door clicked shut behind Tori, silence fell in the penthouse. Carla took a deep breath, setting the dish towel down on the counter like nothing happened, though her heart was still racing. Kingston was the first to speak, his lips tugging into a crooked smile. Well, that was something, he said, turning to face her fully. Carla raised an eyebrow, arms folding across her chest. You're telling me you should really think about changing the locks. Kingston laughed under his breath, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, I guess I didn't think anyone would still be using that key. She tilted her head slightly, giving him a look. Really? You didn't think a woman like that would pop back in the second she smelled something new? He winced. To be honest, I thought she was done with me. Guess I was wrong. Carla softened just a little, but her eyes stayed sharp. Look, Kingston, I'm not the jealous type. I don't need to compete with anyone, and I won't. But I'm not gonna stand here and let someone walk in like they still own you. Tyler and I, we don't share space with drama. Kingston's expression grew serious, stepping closer. You don't ever have to compete with her, or anyone. You think I want Tori? Carla, when she walked out, she took everything fake about my life with her. I never wanted that back. Carla searched his face, her arms slowly dropping to her sides. Then what do you want? His voice dropped, earnest and low. You. The word hung in the air, heavier than it should have been, because it was real. Carla's breath hitched slightly, her walls wavering. You sure? She asked, her voice softer, vulnerable now. Because this, she gestured between them, this is messy. I've got a kid, a life that doesn't revolve around boardrooms and fancy parties. I'm not the woman people expect to see on your arm. Kingston shook his head firmly. Maybe that's why I want you. You're real. You saved me in more ways than one, Carla. She swallowed, emotions warring in her eyes. You don't make it easy, you know. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. Neither do you, she chuckled, rubbing her face. God, I can't believe I kissed you like that in front of her. Kingston stepped closer, his gaze softening. Best moment of my week. Carla looked up at him, her smirk fading into something more vulnerable. You sure you're ready for this? For us? He reached out, gently taking her hand. I'm not sure about a lot of things, Carla, but I know I want to be with you. However long it takes to earn that place, I'm not going anywhere. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded, squeezing his hand. All right, Kingston, one step at a time. He smiled warmly, pulling her closer, and for the first time since Tori barged in, Carla let herself relax, leaning into him. One step at a time, she whispered again. Later that evening, after the tension had died down and the city lights twinkled outside the penthouse windows, Kingston and Carla found themselves curled up on the couch together, enjoying the rare moment of quiet. Carla leaned her head against Kingston's shoulder, and for once, Kingston felt at peace, until a small voice broke the calm. So, are you two gonna get married now or what? Both Carla and Kingston blinked, sitting up straighter as Tyler padded into the room in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes but looking very awake, and very curious. Tyler, Carla said, her cheeks flushing. What are you still doing up? I was thirsty, he said simply, padding over to grab his water bottle from the kitchen counter. But I heard you guys talking and kissing. Carla groaned, burying her face in her hands as Kingston chuckled softly beside her. Tyler took a long sip of water, then plopped down in the chair opposite them, completely serious. So? Tyler asked again, swinging his little legs. Are you gonna marry my mom now, Kingston? 'Cause if you are, we should probably get a dog too. Kingston bit back a laugh, giving Carla a sideways glance as she glared playfully at her son. Tyler, she sighed, grown-ups don't get married just because they kiss. Tyler shrugged like he wasn't convinced. Well, in movies they do. Kingston laughed outright at that. He's got a point, he teased. Carla shot him a look. Don't encourage him. Tyler grinned. So you're gonna get married? Kingston leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked Tyler right in the eye. Hey buddy, how about this? What if we take it slow, like flying one of your planes? You gotta check all the parts first before you take off, right? Tyler considered that, nodding wisely. Yeah. If you don't, it crashes. Exactly, Kingston said with a smile. So we're making sure everything works first. But I do like spending time with you and your mom. A lot. Tyler seemed satisfied with that answer, but then he added, Okay, but if you guys do get married, I get to be the boss of the dog. Carla laughed, ruffling his hair. If there's ever a dog, you can definitely be the boss. Tyler beamed and yawned, finally rubbing his eyes. All right, kiddo, bedtime for real, Carla said, standing and guiding him toward his room. As Tyler disappeared down the hallway, Kingston looked after him with a fond smile, then turned to Carla. So, a dog, huh? He teased. Carla smirked over her shoulder. Don't get ahead of yourself, right? But as she turned away, Kingston caught the small secret smile she was trying to hide, and it gave him hope. Hope that maybe one day, Tyler's funny little question wouldn't be so far-fetched. Kingston invites Carla to his company annual fundraising gala. The grand ballroom glittered with elegance as Kingston guided Carla through the crowd, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. Dressed in a sleek, deep blue gown that hugged her curves, Carla looked breathtaking, though she tugged nervously at the hem as flashes from cameras near the entrance faded behind them. "I still don't know if this was a good idea," she murmured under her breath, eyeing the sea of perfectly polished guests. Kingston leaned in close, his voice soft. "You're the best idea I've had in a long time." Carla's heart skipped, but she kept her gaze steady as curious eyes followed them. "Everyone's staring," she said with a tight smile. "Let them," Kingston said simply, his hand squeezing hers. "I want them to know who I'm with." They approached a group of executives, and as Kingston introduced her, "This is Carla Hayes." Carla stood a little taller, refusing to be reduced to whispers and glances. By the time they reached their table, Kingston leaned close again, whispering, "You belong here, Carla. With me." She glanced up at him, her lips curving into a small smile. "Maybe I do," she whispered back. As they sat down at their table, Carla smoothed her dress, glancing around at the sea of polished executives, celebrities, and high-profile guests mingling over champagne. Kingston leaned in slightly, watching her. "You okay?" She gave him a look, half playful, half nervous. "I feel like everyone's waiting for me to trip over my own heels." He chuckled softly. "If you do, I'll catch you." Carla raised an eyebrow. "You say that now, but if I take out half this fancy crowd, we'll see." Kingston smiled, his eyes softening as he reached for her hand under the table. "You're doing better than you think. You've got them wondering who this beautiful woman at my side is." She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. "Yeah, right, probably wondering where I bought this dress on sale." He shook his head. "No. They're wondering how I convinced someone like you to say yes to being here with me." Carla's smile softened, and for a moment, the noise of the room faded. "Kingston," she said quietly, her thumb brushing over his fingers, "I'm not used to this world. I'm here, because of you." His hand tightened around hers. "I'm glad you are. I don't want to do this without you." She looked at him, vulnerability and strength mingling in her gaze. "Then don't." And just like that, with a quiet smile, Kingston knew, no matter what world they came from, this was where they belonged. Just as Carla relaxed into the evening sipping her drink, Kingston's smile suddenly faded, his eyes narrowing at something. Or someone, across the room. Carla followed his gaze and immediately spotted Tori, gliding through the crowd like she owned it, her red dress making her stand out among the other guests. Next to her was a man holding a notepad and a press badge, clearly a reporter. "Of course," Carla muttered under her breath, because tonight wasn't nerve-wracking enough. Kingston's jaw tightened. "I didn't know she'd be here." Before Carla could respond, Tori approached with the reporter, a fake smile plastered across her face. "Kingston," Tori purred, "you look well, and this must be the heroine everyone's been whispering about." Her eyes raked over Carla in a way that made her skin crawl. "Carla Hayes," Carla said, holding her head high. "Nice to meet you, again." Tori's smile twitched, but she didn't miss a beat. "You've certainly made an impression. Everyone's dying to know. How does it feel to step into the billionaire spotlight overnight?" Before Carla could answer, the reporter leaned in, voice too loud to be casual. "Miss Hayes, care to comment on how you and Mr. Wright got together? Some say it's a Cinderella story. Others say it's something less flattering." The jab hung in the air. Carla's cheeks flushed, but before Kingston could speak, she straightened her shoulders. "Funny," Carla said coolly, locking eyes with the reporter. "I didn't realize saving someone's life came with a spotlight. But if you want a headline, write this down. Kingston and I, we're real. No fairy tales, no schemes, just two people figuring it out." The reporter blinked, surprised by her calm but firm tone. Tori scoffed. "We'll see how long that will last. I'm pretty sure we will be together a lot longer than that man you ran off with," Carla spatted. Carla smiled sweetly, stepping closer to Kingston and slipping her arm through his. Long enough for you to find someone else's party to crash. The reporter, sensing no drama to exploit, muttered a polite thanks and walked off. Tori lingered a moment longer, her smile faltering under Carla's cool stare, then turned sharply and walked away. Kingston exhaled, looking down at Carla with admiration. Remind me never to underestimate you again. Carla smirked. Don't forget it, right? He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. Never. And as the music swelled in the background, Carla realized she didn't have to fit into Kingston's world. She could stand her ground and take her place in it. As the tension from Tori and the reporter melted into the background, the band shifted into a soft, elegant melody. The lights dimmed slightly, casting a warm glow over the ballroom as couples began moving to the dance floor. Kingston turned to Carla, a small but genuine smile tugging at his lips. Dance with me? He asked softly, offering his hand. Carla hesitated, glancing around at all the watching eyes, the same people who had just witnessed her stand her ground. But when she looked back at Kingston, all she could see was him, and suddenly, the rest of the room didn't matter. All right, she whispered, slipping her hand into his. He led her to the center of the floor, drawing her close, one hand resting gently at her waist, the other holding her hand as they swayed in time with the music. As they danced, Kingston leaned in, his voice low and tender. You were amazing back there, you know. Carla smiled softly, her eyes searching his. You make me brave, Kingston. His brow furrowed slightly as if trying to read deeper into her words, but before he could speak, Carla took a slow breath, her heart pounding. I love you, she whispered, her voice trembling but sure. Kingston froze for a heartbeat, his eyes locking with hers, and then a slow, breathtaking smile spread across his face. You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that, he murmured. Before Carla could react, Kingston cupped her face gently and kissed her. Long, deep, and full of everything he hadn't said out loud, right there on the dance floor, in front of everyone. The music faded into the background as they melted into each other, completely unaware of the eyes on them. When he finally pulled back, resting his forehead against hers, Kingston whispered with a smile. I love you too, Carla. So much. Carla's smile was radiant, her eyes glistening. Guess we just gave them another headline, she teased, breathless. Kingston chuckled, holding her close. Let them write what they want. All I care about is you. And as the music swelled around them, they continued to dance, wrapped in each other, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows, casting a soft, golden glow across the living room. The scent of fresh pancakes filled the air as Carla moved around the kitchen, flipping them with practiced ease. Kingston sat at the kitchen island, still in sweatpants and a t-shirt, watching her with a soft smile that hadn't left his face since the night before. It had been a night of public declarations, dancing, kissing, her saying, I love you. He still couldn't believe it. Just then, Tyler came running out of his room, his usual morning burst of energy filling the space. Mom, Kingston, I dreamed we had a puppy that could fly, he said excitedly, hopping onto a stool beside Kingston. Kingston laughed, ruffling Tyler's bedhead. Flying puppy, huh? That's a new one. Carla smiled, plating pancakes. Well, good morning to you too, kiddo. As Tyler poured syrup all over his stack, he glanced between the two adults, squinting suspiciously. You guys are acting weird. Carla and Kingston exchanged a look, both fighting smiles. Weird how? Carla asked, trying to sound casual. Tyler set his fork down, narrowing his eyes like a detective in one of his cartoons. You're smiling a lot, and you were talking all quiet last night? Then I think I saw you guys hugging in the kitchen. Kingston chuckled. Hugging is weird now? Tyler shrugged. Only when grown-ups do it and act funny about it. Carla sighed, wiping her hands on a towel, and came to sit next to him. Okay. You got us. Tyler perked up. Got you how? Carla reached out, brushing his hair back. Kingston and we're together now, like boyfriend and girlfriend. Tyler blinked, processing that. You mean like a real boyfriend? Kingston leaned in with a warm smile. Yeah, buddy, a real one. There was a long pause. Does that mean? Tyler started, eyes wide. If you get married, we really can get a dog? Carla burst out laughing and Kingston grinned. That's what you're thinking about right now? Carla teased, ruffling his hair. Tyler shrugged but grinned. Well, and also, I like Kingston. So if he's staying around, that's cool, I guess. Kingston's chest warmed at the words, and he reached over to give Tyler a gentle high five. I'm not going anywhere, bud. Promise. Tyler looked satisfied. Okay, but if we do get a dog, I'm still the boss of it. Carla smiled, pulling her son in for a hug. Deal. Kingston leaned over and kissed Carla's temple, smiling at both of them. Guess we're a team now. Tyler grinned, already digging into his pancakes like nothing had changed, but everything had. And for the first time, sitting there together, it felt like a family. A few nights after their fundraiser date and Tyler's hilarious reaction, Kingston sat on the balcony of the penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle like stars. The view was beautiful, but for once his focus was inside, where Carla and Tyler were curled up on the couch watching a movie, laughing at something silly. His heart felt full. Something he hadn't known was possible before them. Carla noticed him watching and tilted her head. You okay over there, right? You look like you've got something on your mind. He smiled but didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, walked over to the couch and sat down next to her, Tyler now dozing against her side. Can we talk? He asked softly, glancing at her like this was more than casual. Carla's smile faltered slightly as she studied him. Yeah, what's up? He took a deep breath, rubbing his hands together nervously, something she rarely saw him do. I was thinking, Kingston started slowly, these past few weeks having you and Tyler here. It's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. Carla's heart gave a little skip, but she kept her face careful. Kingston, I know you like your space, he added quickly. I know you've built a life that's quiet, simple, and I love that about you, but He looked down for a moment, then met her gaze, his eyes sincere and full of emotion. I want to wake up with you, eat dinner with you, help Tyler with school and teach him how to build a plane that actually flies across the room. He gave her a small smile, but there was a tremble of vulnerability in his voice. I guess what I'm trying to say is... Kingston reached over, gently taking her hand. Carla, would you and Tyler consider moving in? Not just for now, but for real. With me, here. Carla stared at him, her heart racing. Kingston? She whispered, glancing at Tyler, who was still half asleep beside her. I know it's fast, Kingston said, his voice soft, and I'll give you all the time you need. But I'm in this, with you. I want to be the man you and Tyler can count on. Always. Carla swallowed hard, emotions swirling in her chest. This is a big ask, she finally said, her voice wavering. It's not just me I have to think about. I know, he nodded, and I wouldn't ask if I wasn't sure. I want both of you. Carla looked away for a moment, her hand still in his, her heart pounding in her ears. Finally, she looked back at him, a soft smile breaking through her uncertainty. Let me think about how many planes you're going to have to build with Tyler before you regret asking, she teased gently, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Kingston chuckled, leaning in closer. That's a yes? Carla exhaled, smiling fully now. That's a yes. Kingston's face lit up, and without thinking, he leaned in and kissed her, soft and deep, like he couldn't believe his luck. When they broke apart, Carla rested her forehead against his. You know this means you're stuck with us, right? She whispered. Kingston smiled, brushing his thumb over her cheek. Exactly what I want. From the couch, Tyler stirred sleepily, mumbling, If we move in, I get the room with the best view and a puppy. Carla and Kingston both laughed, pulling Tyler close. Looks like we've got negotiations to start, Kingston murmured, holding them both tighter. And for the first time, it truly felt like home. For all of them. 6 months passed in a beautiful blur. Carla and Tyler had fully settled into Kingston's penthouse, though, with Tyler's paper planes hanging from the ceiling and drawings on the fridge, it felt more like their home now. Kingston had never been happier. Mornings with Carla in the kitchen, Tyler running around in his pajamas, and late nights curled up on the couch as a family. It was everything he hadn't even known he wanted. But today felt different. Carla turned to face Kingston, smiling, but something in his eyes made her pause. "Kingston?" she asked gently, tilting her head. He reached into his pocket, suddenly more nervous than he expected. "You know?" he began, voice lower now. "When you agreed to move in, I thought it was everything I needed. But being with you and Tyler these past 6 months, it made me realize something." Carla's brows drew together, curious but cautious. "I don't want just to share a home with you," Kingston whispered, stepping closer. "I want to share a long life." Her eyes widened slightly as he slowly dropped to one knee, pulling out a small, elegant box. "Carla Hayes," Kingston said, looking up at her with more love than she'd ever seen in his eyes. "You and Tyler are my whole world. I want to be there for every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every laugh, and every dream. Will you marry me?" Tears immediately welled up in Carla's eyes as she covered her mouth with her hands, completely caught off guard. "Kingston," she breathed, her voice trembling. Tyler, hearing the commotion, ran into the room, skidding to a stop when he saw Kingston on one knee. "Are you asking Mom to marry you?" Tyler asked, wide-eyed. Kingston smiled and glanced at Tyler. "Yeah, I am." Tyler grinned from ear to ear. "Say yes, Mom. Say yes." Carla laughed through her tears, wiping her cheeks as she looked at both Kingston and Tyler, her boys. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, her voice steady and full of love. "Yes, Kingston, I'll marry you." Kingston's smile broke wide as he stood, slipping the ring on her finger. Tyler threw his arms around both of them, yelling, "We're gonna be a real family." Kingston held them close, resting his forehead against Carla's, whispering, "We already are." Carla smiled, her tears finally giving way to joy. "And I guess," she added with a smirk, "we'll need to start looking for that puppy now." Kingston laughed, holding her tighter. "Anything you want." And as they stood there, wrapped up together in the home they built, it was clear this was just the beginning of their forever. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tales. Like, share, comment, and subscribe.